Right off the top of the hour, we begin with the turning of history's page this Black History Month. The Reverend Jesse Jackson, a civil rights icon and two-time presidential candidate, died early this morning at the age of 84. Jackson, you probably know this, was a protege of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was at the Lorraine Motel when an assassin killed Dr. King in 1968. He then picked up the torch and continued a lifetime of human rights crusades, both at home and representing the United States abroad. Jackson family said in a statement, "Our father was a servant leader, not only to our family, but to the oppressed, the voiceless, and the overlooked around the world." The daughter of Martin Luther King posted this tribute with a picture of her father and Jesse Jackson. Bernice King wrote these words under the photo: "Both now ancestors." You know, Jackson's passionate push for equal rights led him to two presidential bids, both in 1984 and later. He inspired supporters to dream that nothing, not even the White House, should be out of reach.
You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you are qualified and you hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive on tomorrow night and beyond. Keep hope alive. I love you very much. I love you very much.
One of many rousing speeches you are sure to hear throughout today. It's our honor today to speak with Derrick Johnson, President and CEO of the NAACP. Thank you so much for joining us on this consequential day. So take us through the legacy of Jesse Jackson and what his passionate work for civil rights means to our country. I'm especially asking because I have 3 children. They're going to sit around a dinner table tonight, and I want to know what to talk to them about.
Well, Jesse Jackson is American history. He's a direct link between the civil rights movement and to the advocacy for opportunity today. Whether it's Operation Breadbasket to address the needs around poor people and hunger in this country. His run for the presidency registered more people in the 1980s than anyone else, both in 88 and 84. His advocacy on behalf of white farmers in Iowa and Nebraska, his advocacy on blue-collar workers for black and white people in inner cities like Chicago and in Detroit, his global diplomacy in negotiating the release of hostages in Iran and other places. Jesse Jackson's leadership can be measured over decades, not one event, not one episode, not one agenda, but someone who is a true American hero.
Of course, we're having this conversation and hearing these tributes, of course, during Black History Month, but also at a time when we're seeing President Donald Trump on social media making ties to Jesse Jackson at a time when DEI policies are being eliminated at the government level, a lot of businesses also following suit. What was the position of the NAACP relative to this and the timing? And what do you think Mr. Jackson's legacy can be relative to the context that we're looking at today?
Well, it's very clear that Black history is American history. You cannot decouple the two. The fight for democracy and equal protection under the law is a part of Jesse Jackson's legacy, is rooted in this nation's constitutions, making sure we have opportunity for our young people across communities. If you think about his 1988 speech at the Democratic National Convention, and he talked about all of the diverse communities who were advocating around their agenda. And he said that, their patches were not big enough. But if you put all those patches together, whether it's farmers in rural America or African Americans in urban settings or women who are advocating for rights, you put those patches together, it is truly a quilt, a mosaic of what America is and how we should be advocating in this moment.
Listening to an interview early this morning, something that didn't often make headlines very early on in Jesse Jackson's career, he learned of a female reporter who was taken off of the air because she chose to wear her hair naturally. He staged a protest, and she was able to go back and claim her job and change the way women could show up in the workplace. This reporter this morning said this is the importance of showing up, not only when the cameras are there, but also on smaller issues. We also heard the Reverend Jackson tell that Democratic convention, keep hope alive. What is the message during these days and times about showing up and keeping hope alive from your perspective?
that individuals should never have to suppress their identity for other people's comfort, that we all bring to the table a level of our own individual genius. And if we put that all our geniuses on the table, we are a stronger nation as a result. His advocacy around worker rights is very clear, is a strong pattern, and he was strategic. You know, showing up for that reporter was really important, but it created a standard nationally that we still look at today. It is truly important to recognize the genius of Reverend Jackson. He was strategic. He had a very strong voice. His platform was sturdy. And as a result, many Americans are benefiting from his work today, whether they know it or not.
Derrick Johnson, thank you so much for your thoughts today. We appreciate you and those you serve with on the NAACP.
Joining us now is Obery Hendricks. He's an adjunct professor at Columbia University's Departments of Religion and African American and African Diaspora Studies. He's also a nationally recognized scholar of social justice. Thank you for being here. And you knew the Reverend. What came to mind when you learned the news of his passing?
Well, you know, we knew it was coming, but it just felt like the end of an era. You know, like something has shifted in the atmosphere. You know, his death leaves a big hole in the world.
In 1988, Reverend Jackson went to the Democratic Convention as the runner-up in that year's party nomination. It was the furthest any Black person had ever gone in a U.S. presidential election. This was 20 years before President Obama was elected. What was that moment like for you?
Well, it was an extraordinary moment. I mean, you know, it was so inspiring. Well, you know, he was an inspirational speaker anyway, but it just showed that, you know, how far we could go, how far the country had gone, and that there was room for a Black person, if they played their cards right, you know, politically, to move forward. That was a very important moment. And I'll say this, one thing that was so important is that when you look at Bernie Sanders' first platform, it's almost identical to Jesse Jackson's platform from '88, except there's nothing about South Africa in it, which just shows how forward-looking he was, how brilliantly forward-looking he was.
And when you look at the issues our country faces today, what lessons do you think the next generation should take away from Reverend Jackson's life?
Well, Reverend Jackson was, you know, a full-time, untiring warrior for justice. You know, he modeled for us what it means to have a committed life. And I think that's something very important for young people to see, you know, these days. There's you know, the world is taking a very materialistic turn. And, but Reverend Jackson really showed that if you commit yourself to a cause wholeheartedly and you're willing to work for it and be uncompromising, that you can make a difference in the world. And I think that's something that these coming generations should keep in mind, that we should, our goal should be to make a difference in the world. And he made a huge difference in the world for millions of Americans. I mean, what he did really has touched the lives of every American in one way or another.
Obery Hendricks, we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bishop William Barber II is the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. He was a friend and mentee of Jackson. Bishop, thank you for being here. How did the Reverend impact your life?
You know, I now lead Repairers of the Breach, which believes in moral fusion organizing, bringing people together of all different races, creeds, and color around an agenda. When I worked with Reverend Jackson from a young person 40 years ago, he taught us that what we needed was a rainbow. And we needed a rainbow that was not just a Black agenda, but with a strong race critique, but also an economic critique, also a critique that lifted from the bottom everybody and brought people together around the kind of hope that was not just daydreaming and wishing for things to happen, but a hope that really got in there and worked. And as you worked, hope was produced out of the effort. Reverend Jackson taught us long before we had the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. He taught us what real moral leadership looked like, that cares about everybody, that believes in love, believes in truth, believes in uplifting those at the margins.
What do you think his legacy will be, his most lasting legacy in the fight for civil rights and social justice?
Well, it'll be broad, and that's one of the things. It won't be just one thing, because while on the one hand, as his wife has said this morning, a mighty lion has fallen. Lions protect and expand the pride. Reverend Jackson was trying to protect the gains of the civil rights movement, but also win the things the civil rights movement didn't win because it was killed, assassinated. And so when we see voting rights under attack today, we see the fact we still do not have a living wage, health care for all. Those are the kinds of things that Reverend Jackson was still pushing for. And his legacy will be one of determination. 84, he didn't quit, even with his disease. A few years ago, we were walking down in Texas, 21 miles to Austin. He came when we were standing for justice during COVID to make sure that the least of these were taken care of. And we were fighting for the Congress to properly deal with voting rights. We look up and there's Reverend Jackson one day, right there in the midst of it. He was constantly inspiring, constantly encouraging other people. But most of all, he reminded us every day that there had to be a unity among people. You could find him on a tractor in Iowa or in the Delta of Mississippi or in Harlem or with Latinos or on a reservation. He understood that the greatest fear of modern day authoritarianism in this are for Black and white and brown and indigenous and Asian and other people to get together, form a political alliance that can fundamentally shift the economic architecture of the nation. And that will be his legacy, laying the pathway down. It will be ours now to pick it up and carry it the rest of the way.
Reverend William Barber, thank you so much.
On a broader level, Jesse Jackson changed American politics. Jesse Jackson changed the civil rights movement. He was a consequential and transformative figure. And he changed New York politics. Let me go in that order. One, it was when Dr. King died, was killed in '68, he was talking to Jesse Jackson and Ben Branch over the rail at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. And Reverend Jackson was literally one of the two last people to speak to him. I always wondered how much trauma that must have been for him to witness Reverend King's assassination. He never would talk about it too much, but it drove him. He kept saying, we gotta keep Dr. King's dream alive. He was 12 years younger than King, as I was 13 years younger than him. And he would always challenge me that your generation's got to do what John Lewis and all of us that were younger than Dr. King did. He kept the movement going by keeping the economic boycotts of Operation Breadbasket going, by dealing with diversity, by fighting for affirmative action. You must remember when the late 70s and 80s, when Reaganism rose and there was this backlash on civil rights, Jesse Jackson took the front with John Lewis and others to restore what Dr. King had done. We romanticized the 60s like they were never challenged. They were challenged. We had to renew the Voting Rights Act every 5 years. We had to deal with state laws. And it was Reverend Jackson that did that into our era.
And that was Reverend Al Sharpton talking about and remembering Reverend Jesse Jackson, who died today at the age of 84. Al Sharpton says Jackson kept the civil rights movement going.
Senator, for those in my audience who remember Reverend Jackson's voice in American politics and those too young to have any memory of it all, finish this sentence for me. Reverend Jackson mattered because.
Reverend Jackson mattered because he changed American politics and placed politics in a moral frame. I sit here as the first United States Senator from the state of Georgia, and while I worked hard in those campaigns, I'm very clear that he was literally the bridge between the civil rights movement and the kind of multiracial coalition that makes someone like me possible in the United States Senate. Alongside my Jewish counterpart, John Ossoff, Jesse Jackson, with his Rainbow Push Coalition, laid the groundwork for the work that we're trying to do to this day. There would be no Barack Obama, no President Barack Obama, had he not put that idea in the ether and demonstrated that someone like him could build the kind of coalition necessary to move the country forward.
And Senator Warnock, you talking about yourself and John Ossoff also exemplifies something that is complex about Jesse Jackson's own legacy. In the '84 speech at the Democratic National Convention, he apologized for things he said that had hurt Jewish Americans, and he pleaded with the convention floor and America writ large to forgive him and to think about a coalition that would reunite Jews in America and African Americans. You and John Ossoff in the United States Senate are living exemplars of that.
Yeah, a politician saying I made a mistake and apologizing. Isn't that a breath of fresh air in today's politics? But that's what maturity looks like. He was a moral giant, and he understood that he had made a mistake. He apologized for it, and he moved forward, and he built the kind of multiracial coalition that we need in this moment, in which we are seeing our federal government literally come in and seize ballots in Fulton County, Georgia. We're seeing untrained paramilitary officers on our streets running roughshod over the bedrock constitutional rights of citizens, terrorizing entire communities. His is the kind of moral voice that we need now more than ever.
How did you feel that dynamically in your interactions with him, Senator?
I have to tell you that Reverend Jesse Jackson was my childhood hero. I was a kid growing up in public housing in the 1980s. And I remember walking to the Savannah Civic Center to hear Reverend Jesse Jackson speak as he was beginning his unlikely campaign to run for the United States presidency. And he gave me a glimpse of what's possible in America. He taught me how to say in his own iconic way, I am somebody. And he said it with such power that I believed it. And he's an important part of my own journey as someone who's tried to bring his faith to the public square and bring people together.
I rewatched both his '84 and '88 convention speeches this morning before we sat down, Senator. And there was one line at the beginning of the '84 speech that was not a grabber, but it rings in my ears, and I'd like to see if it rings in yours. Time is neutral and does not change things. With courage and initiative, leaders can change things.
Well, that's right. And he was echoing in those words from his own mentor, Martin Luther King Jr., who said, you know, that change doesn't happen, and it doesn't roll in. Dr. King put it this way. He said, it doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability. Both these men understood that you have to put your body in the struggle. You have to be persistent. You have to stand up time and time again, and you may have setbacks, but you have to keep pushing and bending the arc towards justice.
He also said near the end of that '84 speech, I too was born in the slum, referring to the life of Jesus as well. And just because you were born in a slum does not mean the slum is born in you.
Jesse Jackson centered human dignity. He believed in the somebodyness of every child of God. And his was a dynamic rainbow coalition, the consciousness of which we need to draw upon in this very political moment where there are those who are in power trying to divide us. People who have no vision, traffic, and division, they don't know how to lead us, so they're trying to divide us. Jesse Jackson brought us together, and that's the work that I try to do as someone who was inspired by his ministry and his voice.
He also said this in the 1988 convention speech. Most poor people are not lazy. They are not black. They are not brown. They are mostly white and female and young. But whether white, black, or brown, a hungry baby's belly turned inside out is the same color. Color at pain, color at hurt, color at agony.
He was poetry and spiritual power in the public square. Those aren't the words of a transactional politician, although he was running for office. That's a preacher standing squarely in the public square and calling America to what Lincoln called its higher angels, trying to get us to live up to our ideals.
And how do you regard this day when you see headlines, as anyone can, this past week about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion at the corporate level under constant reevaluation? It's clearly under an executive order assault from this administration. And as you mentioned a moment ago, ICE agents in the streets doing things that probably Jesse Jackson, were he as full-throated as he once was, would be criticizing pretty profoundly.
He certainly would, but it's left to us. I was in Minneapolis a few weeks ago because Reverend Jesse Jackson and Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, white woman and witness named Viola Luiso, who lost her life fighting for voting rights, Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, 2 Jews and an African American. It was always a multiracial coalition that pushed the country closer to its ideals. I went to Minneapolis because I believe, as they do, and as they did, that you have to put your body in the struggle, that the ministry of presence matters, that you have to show up for the poor, the weak, the downtrodden, the marginalized. And that's what informs good public policy. You have to get close to the people. And Jesse Jackson and others taught me that. His voice has been silenced, but his legacy lives on.
Senator Raphael Warnock, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Great to be with you.
I want to bring in Louis Carr. He is the president of BET. Louis, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Before we talk about just sort of the legacy of Reverend Jackson, what did the Reverend mean to you? What did his words, what did his actions mean to you?
Thank you so much for having me. The Jackson family are personal friends of mine, and I had just went to see him about a month ago. And you sort of describe Reverend Jackson as the ordinary man who's just done extraordinary things. Because you would see him on the world stage, but you would also see him in the neighborhood. You would see him at the health club. You would see him walking down the street. So to me, it was how ordinary people can rise and do extraordinary things. His impact on my life was leadership, courageousness, and just how one individual can make a change if they're very intentional about it. So as an inspirational leader, he really impacted me, and I tried to sort of, manage my leadership to be inspirational also.
I wonder if you can tell us what that last conversation with him was like, what you remember about that.
Well, he was in a care facility when I saw him. He was not doing too much talking at that particular time. He was surrounded by his wife, Jackie, and his children. So primarily, it was just spending time with him and sort of making sure that he was comfortable at that particular time.
So I had an opportunity to meet, I met him several times throughout my career. The very first time was he turned up in Haiti in 2010 just days after that devastating earthquake struck. And then I would see him again at sort of crucial moments in not just our history, but in world history. I saw him again most recently, it was in 2018 when I was covering Aretha Franklin and she was about to pass, and he came to spend some time with the family. I want to talk, Louis, how we've been talking a lot about how Reverend Jackson changed the landscape of politics, how his goal was to speak for those who were excluded, marginalized, disenfranchised. Dr. King's dream, he widened that circle to say everybody belongs in that dream. But specifically in terms of the media, you're at BET. How did the way that we covered issues that face the marginalized Black and brown communities, low-income, middle-class people, how did that change because of the rise of Jesse Jackson?
I think he broadened the lens for everybody because, as you just said, the disenfranchised, poor people in general, whether you were Black, brown, green, yellow, white, whatever, he really was concerned about how you were able to navigate, how you were able to live, and how you were able to function in the world today. So it wasn't, and I hope this does not get lost in his legacy, he wasn't just a Black leader for Black people. He was a leader for all people who were disenfranchised, who were poor, who did not have opportunities
So, when you think about politics, but you also think about his work on Wall Street, you think about his work in corporate America to say provide more opportunities, to provide loans, those type of things. So I hope that legacy doesn't get lost in all of the things that we're going to hear over the next week or so.
I also think that it's people like this that can inspire us sometimes to make little changes in our little world or in our little community. And I know you founded multiple organizations to try to help improve diversity in the workforce and to tell more Black stories. So talk about how he inspired that for you.
Well, I think, there are two things that I remember. And that is the call that we are somebody and keep hope alive. Growing up in a poor community like I did, you didn't have a lot of role models who sit in corporate America who are rich and wealthy. That call out that you are somebody motivated me personally. It touched my soul, it touched my heart to believe that I could go beyond what I could see in my community. And this keep hope alive, I think it still resounds today for all of us, because whether we are facing challenges, whether we are trying to overcome hurdles, or whether we're trying to get opportunities, keep hope alive is that thing that I think is the driver for all people who are trying to achieve something that may have never been achieved before. So those two things I would ask people to remember. I am somebody and keep hope alive.
I recall specifically, Louis, in that speech where the line that always struck me, and it's still one that it's hard to paraphrase because he goes, I may be young, but I am somebody. But the one that always struck me was, I may make a mistake, but I am somebody. And I wonder if speaking just through the lens of media, the I am somebody speech is Afro Jesse. Jesse with the afro and the sideburns and fiery Jesse, right? And by the time he's running for president, the second Black American to ever do so after Shirley Chisholm, it's like he's like the unifier Jesse, right? I mean, and when you think about how BET is going to look back at his life and legacy, I mean, those two Jessies exist, but which is the one that is more relevant today, do you think?
I think they both are relevant today, because I do think we need people who are very courageous and who think outside the box and who have vision to sort of push beyond the status quo and what we see today. And when I talk to young people, I tell them to be courageous, think outside the box, don't let people keep you within boundaries. So I think that is relevant. But I also think, being at the table, being part of the conversation, being let into the room, into the conference rooms, into the boardroom, into the political arena, you have to be able to navigate and sit there at that table also. So I think they both are relevant today.
Some powerful words there, Louis Carr. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective, my friend. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joining us now to talk about Reverend Jackson and his legacy is Marc Morial. He's president and CEO of the National Urban League. Marc, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
Gail.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate it. I know you've known Jesse Jackson for a long time. How are you remembering him this morning?
I'm remembering him as a role model for a generation of us who ran for office in the 90s. His presidential campaigns of 84 and 88 were influential in how he conducted a campaign to really bring people who were locked out and left out, people who were not registered, but also because he was one of the first to really advance this vision of a multiracial American democracy and make it central to his campaign. The way in which he reached out against many, many people's advice to white farmers and others that people thought a civil rights leader might not have a conversation with, I think was extremely influential. And I think people who run today should look at what his candidacy represented. Secondarily, he's one of the final remaining links to the work of Dr. King. He and Reverend Andrew Young and Sonora Clayton remain the last living real links who worked closely with Dr. King. But his most important contribution was to bring, I think, the ethos of civil rights into mainstream American politics.
And that's what I want to follow up on that, because Marc, he ran in 84 and in 88. Talk about what those campaigns did for American politics and why they are so historic today.
He paved the way for both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. He led an effort to change the way that Democratic candidates were nominated from a winner-take-all primary system to a system of sort of proportional division of delegates. And he expanded the size of the DNC to bring others into the party's decision-making apparatus. That was so important. We've got to remember that at his side were people like Alexis Herman, Ron Brown, Donna Brazile, Mignon Moore, and many, many others who cut their teeth in Reverend Jackson's campaigns in '84 and '88. So that impact on American politics, I think, sustains and retains until today. I am clear there would not have been a Barack Obama without a Jesse Jackson, because it meant that the Obama campaign of 2008 was not a symbolic campaign. It was a campaign that could say, I'm running because I am going to win and I have a real chance. When Jesse ran, many did not take him seriously, so he was working against the odds continuously. The fact that he went all the way to the convention 2 times, garnered delegates, and had an impact defied conventional political logic at the time.
He wasn't without controversy, Marc. How do you square some of that about Jesse Jackson? How does that fit into his legacy? Yes.
So, great leaders always have detractors. We sometimes deify great leaders, but they're human beings who make mistakes, who stumble, who fall. I think Jesse, was clear that he was not perfect. And he acknowledged on numerous occasions that he was not perfect. And I think we all should take a lesson from that great people, great leaders make mistakes, make errors, sometimes stumble. And we should not hold them to a standard of perfection. We should hold them to a standard of service. And I think Jesse Jackson meets that standard in a profound way.
Yeah, no one can discount some of the great work that he did and the legacy he's left us. Marc Morial, thank you again so much for taking the time with us.